What's up guys, my name is Nick. Welcome back to my channel. In this video we're talking about a handful of my favorite books from 2020, and then I am going to do a little bit of a reading recap, I suppose, to discuss my reading sort of journey over the course of 2020. So obviously, like I said, first we're going to talk about the books that I read very briefly, not particularly in depth, but we're just going to share the books. And we're going to get started with two that I'm going to tie together, and that is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, and we're going to talk about Hyperion by Dan Simmons. And the reason that I want to talk about these two books specifically together is because I like them for the same reasons. Now, obviously, these are two different genre books. Assassin's Apprentice is a fantasy book. Hyperion is a science fiction book. But the thing that I like about both of these is really just the complete depth and the seeming complexity to the content and the universe in each of these books. Every single page in these books is pretty much packed with maybe not super, but it's definitely packed with detail and information that helps you kind of sculpt and, sort of get an image of the universe and the characters in that universe, which is fantastic. It's really great. So just for an overall, just general world building sort of for the world building of both of these stories and both of these books and both of these series too, because these are the first books in a series. These two are really fantastic books. Moving on from that, we're going to talk about I guess this is maybe a horror fantasy kind of thing, sort of book, I suppose. You find it at the bookstore, at Barnes & Noble specifically, in the horror section. But we're talking about, this is Burn the Dark by S.A. Hunt, which is the first book in the Malus Domestica trilogy, I believe it is going to be. And the reason that this book is fantastic, or the reason that I like this, and this is one of my favorite books, is because the writing for the characters and the universe is super. I don't know how to describe that. I don't know how to describe it other than really just to say that it pops. Does that make any sense? So the descriptions of the location that this book is set in and all that stuff, it just pops off the page, and I can just really sort of absolutely visualize the small town in Georgia in which this book is set. The characters are also super unique. They all have their individual, very unique individual personalities that, again, the way that they are written and the dialogue that they are given seems very real too, realistic. So the image that you have of a specific character, whatever the role is, they act like it. They act very much like it, and I think that is fantastic. On top of that, just the whole idea of this book too, where our main character is basically a witch hunter. She hunts down witches and she kills them, and she records them and posts the videos of that whole process on YouTube. And she posts them on YouTube under the guise of the fact of them being fake and set up, but they're actually she's actually posting her real actual things that she's done. So she's killing witches in real life and putting it on YouTube under the premise that all of it is fake and set up too, which is very cool. I like this. I don't mean that's really all that I've got to say about it. Moving on from that, we're moving on to another fantasy book, but this one is The Last Smile in Sunder City, which is by Luke Arnold, which is the first book in the Fetch Phillips Chronicles, I believe is the name of the series of books. And the reason that I like this book is because it is a noir detective novel set in a fantasy setting. And so it's being a little grim, a little dark, a little dirty, getting into areas and subjects and stuff like that, and just things that happen that are a little bit grimy and dingy is cool. It's different. I do like characters, or at least our main character in this book, Fetch Phillips, is somebody who is pretty seriously flawed as a human being in this universe, and that's cool. It's nice to kind of read a book where you're following a character who is not a flawless, pure, perfect person. This guy's got some serious issues, and he's not particular. And there's plenty of instances where he's not necessarily a likable guy, which is cool. I enjoy it, but at the end of the day, I personally kind of like him just because of, I think, that because you kind of really gotta get to connect with the struggle that he's going through over the course of this book and the next book in this series, which I've already read. So for that reason, I just like this. If you want something that's if you want a fantasy book that's a little bit darker, then definitely check this one out. Moving on to a sci-fi book, we're going to talk about, or I just want to briefly share Semiosis by Sue Burke, which is basically a first contact novel where human beings shoot off into outer space and land on a planet with alien life, and they just kind of attempt to make it. Now, the interesting thing about this, and the reason that this is on my list of favorite books that I read in 2020, is because the alien life form, the sentient, intelligent life form that the human beings come in contact with and that they need to, and that they cooperate with over the course of this book, is not an alien like we right now in present day would imagine, right? It is not like an extraterrestrial with 2 legs and 2 arms, and like they look kind of like us mostly, but they're not really, obviously, because they're from a different planet. This is like a plant. The sentient life form that they cooperate with and they cohabitate with on this planet is a plant, in that sense. Super intelligent, super smart. It definitely picks up on what's going on, and it basically is like as intelligent, if not smarter, than us, than me, my brain, human beings in general. And so it's a very interesting sort of dynamic at play, because obviously plants cannot communicate with human beings the same way that an alien like we would typically imagine could probably communicate with aliens, because they don't have like a vocalized language per se. But they do communicate and they do work together and they do sort of stuff. So watching that relationship kind of develop and grow is very interesting. So just the way that dynamic was played with in this book is very, very cool. And that's why it's one of my favorite books from 2020. Finally, the last book that I have to say is one of my favorite books from 2020 is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And just flat out, the reason that this is a book that I love is because of just the emotional impact that the ending of this book had. The entirety of the story just builds up perfectly to what the actual conclusion and the conclusion, and then I suppose the falling action, a little wrap up of this book, of this story is. It's absolutely fantastic. I wasn't necessarily expecting to get choked up when I was reading this book. But I did. The end of the book kind of like got me choked up, like I was gonna cry a little bit. I didn't not like tears crying, but I did, I suppose, cry. But I'm being dramatic. I'm exaggerating. I didn't really cry, but I did get like all emotional about the end of the story. So that's really the reason that this is fantastic. It's really cool, just sort of in general playing with the whole vibe, or the idea, or exploring, I guess, the idea of like what it's like to live day to day, but everybody that you actually come in contact with forgets about you as soon as like you leave their line of sight or you leave the room. So it's kind of interesting sort of playing with that, like how that actually physically works, and then of course how that like kind of affects you as a person who can never be remembered and can never leave a mark on the world at large. How that affects you emotionally. So I really kind of enjoyed reading all of that, and then of course the ending of the book was just absolutely phenomenal. Definitely worth all of the work to read through this book. Not like it was like hard work or anything, but all of the effort to get to the end of this book. Now that I have shared with you 6 of my favorite books that I read last year, let's talk about my reading journey briefly. I'm going to try and keep it within like a couple of minutes, so this video doesn't end up being stupidly long. We'll say that. So just first off, I used to be, back when I was before high school, like a pretty avid reader. Like I do remember, like my parents would put me in bed, it's bedtime, go to sleep, and I'd be reading in the dark by the light from the hall that was coming into my bedroom from the hallway. Like I was an avid reader. And then high school and like my access to like a computer and video games like that kind of came around, and then reading sort of went by the wayside. I've played video games more, I played video games instead of reading. And so this last year, the beginning of February-ish, was when I really, really like seriously committed to getting into reading books for fun, right? Because I wanted to sort of cut out the amount of free time that I was spending watching YouTube videos and playing video games and stuff like that, doing stuff that's not necessarily the most productive in my mind, for something that is more constructive. And so I started reading. And the thing that I noticed that I wasn't as good at over the course of when I first started, which I've noticed has gotten better, especially, recently, is just my sort of understanding and my retention of what I'm reading. So obviously my reading level and my ability to read the words on the page hasn't really decreased since I was an avid and active reader, but what did decrease really was kind of my ability to retain what I'm reading for extended periods of time. So a year ago, 12 months ago from today or so, I would be able to read the words on the page and they would be there, go in my mind for a few minutes or so, and then just basically go right back out. There would be no it wouldn't necessarily stick in my mind for an extended period of time, so that when I got to something later on in a story that I could be like, oh yeah, this happened back, however many pages ago, and so this is that, and I can't put things together. Kind of makes reading mystery stories a little hard when you can't necessarily actively remember twists and turns and things that people said and stuff that happened in the past in a book, But as I continued to read, my ability to kind of pick up and retain that kind of stuff over the course of reading a book has gotten better. So I've been able to understand the books that I'm reading on a more deeper level, other than just a very surface level understanding of what's going on. And that's just been 12 months of reading. I'm not particularly amazing at that aspect of reading just yet, but we will get there. Because that's the one thing that I've kind of realized is reading is a skill and it is a talent to a certain, in some ways, that if you do not practice it and you do not do it all the time, then you kind of lose your ability, you lose your sharpness at reading and understanding what you're reading. And so with more practice and more use, then I will get better, I'm pretty sure. So we're looking forward to seeing where I'm at in the next 12 months with my comprehension and sort of retention of what I am reading, and just my deep understanding of the books that I read. So that's my little spiel on my 2020 reading journey, just in a general sense. So that's all I got for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. Share your favorite books for 2020 down in the comments below, of course. And then just, of course, general, how did your reading go for 2020? What did you learn about yourself and your relationship with reading? That's kind of an interesting question, I suppose. So let me know the answers and stuff like that down below. I'm very interested to hear what you got to say. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. As always, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.